I was standing in my kitchen, watching through the frosted window as the worst snowstorm in 20 years dumped another 6 inches on top of the foot we already had, when I heard the crunch. Not the soft crunch of snow settling on branches, but the metallic shriek of bumper meeting bumper. My heart sank even before I saw her. Patricia Crowley, HOA president and self-appointed guardian of our neighborhood's moral character, had just plowed her massive SUV straight into my parked sedan. My name is Stephen Randolph, and I had lived in the Riverside Meadows subdivision of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for exactly 8 months. 8 months of living in what I thought would be my dream home, a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a 2-car garage and a decent yard. But those 8 months had been punctuated by increasingly absurd encounters with Patricia and her band of HOA enforcers. Citations for leaving my garbage can out 20 minutes past pickup time. Warnings about the shade of white I used to touch up my mailbox post. A formal letter demanding I remove a bird feeder because it was not on the approved decorative items list. But this was going to be different. I yanked open my front door and stepped onto the porch in my slippers, snow immediately soaking through the thin fabric. Patricia was already out of her vehicle, her puffy jacket making her look like an angry marshmallow as she stomped toward my property line. Her SUV was still running, exhaust billowing into the gray morning air, its front end kissing my sedan's rear quarter panel with far too much intimacy. "Mr. Randolph," she shouted over the wind. Her face was red, though I could not tell if it was from the cold or rage, probably both. "Your vehicle is blocking the proper flow of traffic." I looked at my car, then at her SUV, then back at my car. My sedan was exactly where it always was, parked on my own driveway, a good 15 feet from the street. Her vehicle, meanwhile, had clearly slid on the ice and drifted onto my property. "Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "you just hit my car on my driveway." "Your car should not have been there," she snapped back, as if this was the most logical statement in the world. The HOA regulations clearly state that, during inclement weather, all residents must take reasonable precautions to prevent traffic hazards. "My car is on my property," I repeated, speaking slowly. 20 feet from the road. How is that a traffic hazard?" She pulled out her phone, jabbing at the screen with her gloved finger. Snow collected on her bleached blonde hair, which was pulled back so tightly I wondered if it contributed to her constant state of irritation. "I am documenting this. You will be receiving a citation for creating a hazardous condition during a weather emergency." I walked down my driveway, my slippers completely soaked now, my feet going numb. Up close, I could see the damage. Her SUV's front bumper had caught my car's rear panel, leaving a deep dent and scraping off a strip of paint about 2 feet long. The taillight was cracked, red plastic fragments scattered across the snow like drops of blood. "Patricia, you need to give me your insurance information. You hit my parked car." "I did no such thing," she said, still filming with her phone. "Your vehicle was improperly positioned, and in attempting to navigate the hazardous conditions you created, my vehicle came into contact with yours. This is entirely your fault." I stared at her, genuinely amazed at the audacity. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. Furthermore, I will be bringing this matter before the HOA board at our emergency meeting tonight. We are convening to discuss snow removal protocols, and your blatant disregard for community safety will be addressed." "There is no HOA rule about parking on my own driveway," I said. "I have read the entire covenant, twice." "Then you clearly did not understand it," Patricia said dismissively. She stopped filming and lowered her phone. "The board will be meeting at 7 o'clock tonight at the community center. I expect you to attend and explain yourself." "I am not explaining anything. You hit my car. Give me your insurance information, or I am calling the police." Her eyes narrowed. "You would not dare involve outside authorities in HOA business. That is a direct violation of our bylaws regarding dispute resolution." "Those bylaws do not override the law," I said. "This is a traffic accident. You are required to provide insurance information." Patricia drew herself up to her full height, which was not particularly impressive given that she was maybe 5'3". "Fine. But mark my words, Stephen Randolph. This is not over. Your continued defiance of HOA regulations has been noted, documented, and will be dealt with through appropriate channels." She marched back to her SUV and retrieved her insurance card from the glove compartment, then returned and shoved it at me. I took a photo of it with my phone, which was nearly dead because I had grabbed it on my way out without thinking. The wind was picking up and I could barely feel my feet anymore. "I will also need your driver's license," I said. "Absolutely not. You have my insurance information. That is sufficient." "It is actually not sufficient. In Iowa, you are required to exchange license information after an accident." "This was not an accident," she hissed. "This was a hazardous condition you created." I pulled up the phone app for non-emergency police and started dialing. Patricia's expression shifted from indignant to alarmed. "What are you doing?" "Calling the police to file an accident report." "You will do no such thing. I forbid it." "You do not have that authority," I said, putting the phone to my ear. Patricia lunged forward and actually tried to grab my phone. I stepped back, slipped on the ice, and went down hard on my tailbone. Pain shot up my spine. The phone went flying, landing somewhere in a snowdrift. Patricia stood over me, breathing hard. "You are making a terrible mistake," she said. "The board will hear about your aggressive behavior." I sat there in the snow, soaked and freezing and in pain, staring up at this woman who had just hit my car, refused to take responsibility, and then knocked me down while trying to prevent me from calling the police. Something in me snapped. Not into anger exactly, but into absolute clarity. I was done playing nice with Patricia Crowley and her HOA tyranny. "Get off my property," I said quietly. "Excuse me. Get off my property right now, or I will have you arrested for trespassing and assault." Her face went purple. "How dare you? I am the HOA president." "I do not care if you are the governor. Get off my property." For a moment, I thought she might actually take a swing at me. Instead, she spun on her heel, stalked back to her SUV, and peeled out, her tires spinning on the ice before finally gaining traction. She nearly hit the mailbox on the other side of the street before straightening out and disappearing around the corner. I sat there for another minute, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. Then I hauled myself up, found my phone in the snow, miraculously still working despite being at 3% battery, and went inside. My pants were soaked through, my slippers were ruined, and my back hurt like hell. I changed into dry clothes, plugged in my phone, and made myself a cup of coffee while I thought about my next move. The smart thing would have been to call the police right then and file a report. But I was cold, injured, and needed to think clearly. I also wanted to document everything properly. I went back outside, this time in boots and a proper coat, and took extensive photos of the damage to my car. The tire tracks showing Patricia's SUV had clearly come onto my property, and the general positioning of everything. My neighbor, Rick Manning, came out of his house across the street. Rick was a good guy, retired firefighter, no patience for HOA nonsense. He waved and started making his way over, trudging through the snow. "Hey Stephen, you okay? I saw Patricia's car on your driveway earlier." "She hit my car," I said. then told me it was my fault for parking on my own driveway. Rick let out a low whistle. That woman is something else. You file a report yet? About to. She tried to stop me from calling the cops. Course she did. You know the HOA board meeting got moved up to tonight. They are talking about implementing emergency snow removal fees. Patricia mentioned it. Apparently I am on the agenda for creating a traffic hazard. Rick shook his head. Man, I am sorry you have to deal with this. When Patricia took over as president last year, she went absolutely power mad. My wife and I have been talking about moving, honestly. The constant harassment is not worth it. She cannot keep doing this, I said. There have to be limits. You would think so. But she has got the rest of the board wrapped around her finger. Brenda Walters just goes along with whatever Patricia says. And Todd Simmons is too worried about his own violations to speak up. What violations? Patricia has got something on him. Nobody knows what, but he votes her way every single time, even when it is clearly insane. I finished taking my photos and thanked Rick for checking on me. Back inside, I called the Cedar Rapids Police Department non-emergency line and explained the situation. The dispatcher said they would send an officer when available, but with the storm, response times were delayed. I said that was fine and settled in to wait. While I waited, I did something I should have done months ago. I pulled up the Iowa state laws regarding homeowners associations and started reading. Really reading, not just skimming. What I found was fascinating. HOAs in Iowa had significant power, but that power was not unlimited. They could not override state or local laws. They could not impose arbitrary rules without proper notice and voting procedures. And most importantly, they could not enforce penalties without due process. I started going through every citation, fine, and warning I had received since moving in. Patricia had sent them all via email, which meant I had a complete record. As I reviewed them, a pattern emerged. None of them referenced specific sections of the HOA covenant. They were all vague references to community standards or board policy. When I actually looked up what the covenant said, most of Patricia's citations were based on rules that did not exist. The garbage can timing rule. The covenant said cans must be removed the same day as pickup, but it did not specify a time. The mailbox paint color. The covenant required mailboxes be maintained in good repair, but said nothing about specific paint shades. The bird feeder. Not mentioned anywhere in the governing documents. Patricia had been making up rules and enforcing them as if they were legitimate. And either nobody had challenged her, or those who did had been intimidated into compliance. I was so absorbed in my research that I almost missed the knock on the door. Officer Martinez stood on my porch, snow dusting her uniform jacket. She was maybe 30, with tired eyes that suggested the storm had made for a long shift. Mr. Randolph, you called about a vehicle accident? I invited her in and explained the situation, showing her the photos on my phone and walking her through what had happened. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and then went outside to examine the scene herself. When she came back in, she was frowning. So let me make sure I have got this straight. Miss Crowley hit your parked car, which was on your property, and then claimed you were at fault. That is correct. She also tried to prevent me from calling the police, and in the process knocked me down. Officer Martinez flipped through her notes. Did she make physical contact with you? She grabbed at my phone. I stepped back to avoid her and slipped on the ice. I do not think she intended to knock me down, but her actions directly caused it. Are you injured? My back hurts, but I do not think it is serious. She nodded. I am going to file this as a standard accident report. Based on the physical evidence, Miss Crowley was clearly at fault. Her vehicle came onto your property and struck your parked car. However, the assault allegation is more complicated. Since there was no direct physical contact and you slipped on ice, it would be hard to prosecute. I understand. Honestly, I just want the accident properly documented. That I can do. I will need Miss Crowley's statement as well. Do you have a phone number for her? I provided Patricia's contact information from the HOA directory. Officer Martinez stepped outside to make the call. Through the window, I could see her gesturing as she talked, her expression growing increasingly skeptical. The call lasted about 10 minutes. When she came back in, she looked annoyed. Well, that was interesting. Miss Crowley maintains that you created a hazardous condition and that she is the victim here. She also informed me that the HOA has jurisdiction over this matter and that police involvement is inappropriate. That is not how the law works. No, it is not. I explained that to her several times. Officer Martinez handed me a copy of the accident report. For what it is worth, the evidence clearly supports your account. Miss Crowley's insurance will be liable for the damages. I strongly suggest you contact your insurance company today and start the claims process. What about her claim that I created a hazard? There is no basis for that. You were parked on your own property, well away from the street. Even if you had been parked on the street, it would not justify her hitting your car. She lost control of her vehicle in icy conditions. It happens, and it is the driver's responsibility. After Officer Martinez left, I called my insurance company. The claims representative was sympathetic and efficient, explaining that they would contact Patricia's insurer and begin the process. She also noted that given the clear fault, I should not have to pay my deductible and my rates would not be affected. That was something, at least. But I knew Patricia would not let this go. The HOA meeting was in 5 hours, and I needed to be prepared. I spent the afternoon doing more research and printing out relevant documents. The Iowa Homeowners Association Act, the specific sections of our HOA covenant, records of all the citations and fines Patricia had issued to me, and thanks to Rick's gossip, several other neighbors. I also drafted a formal complaint about Patricia's behavior, documenting not just today's incident but the months of harassment that had preceded it. By 6:30, the snow had finally stopped, leaving everything buried under nearly 2 feet of accumulation. I bundled up and drove carefully to the community center, a squat brick building that served as the social hub for Riverside Meadows. The parking lot had been plowed, probably by the same company Patricia's husband owned. Convenient how that contract got renewed every year without competitive bidding. Inside, the meeting room was set up with a folding table at the front and several rows of chairs facing it. About 20 residents were already seated, all looking cold and miserable. Rick and his wife, Donna, waved me over. I sat next to them just as Patricia entered through the side door, flanked by the other 2 board members. Brenda Walters was a mousy woman in her 50s who always looked like she would rather be anywhere else. Todd Simmons was a heavy-set man who owned a local insurance agency and had the nervous energy of someone with a guilty conscience. They took their seats at the table, Patricia in the center, and she banged a gavel that seemed ridiculously oversized for the occasion. This emergency meeting of the Riverside Meadows HOA is now in session, Patricia announced. Her voice echoed in the sparse room. She had changed clothes since this morning, now wearing a severe gray suit that made her look like a prosecuting attorney. We have several urgent matters to address regarding the snowstorm and community safety. She launched into a prepared speech about the importance of neighborhood standards during weather emergencies. It was full of vague language about community responsibility and maintaining property values. After about 10 minutes of this, she finally got to the point. Which brings me to a serious incident that occurred this morning. One of our residents, in clear violation of safety protocols, created a hazardous situation that resulted in property damage. Every eye in the room turned to me. I kept my expression neutral. Mr. Stephen Randolph has been repeatedly warned about violations of HOA standards. This morning, his reckless decision to park his vehicle in an obstructive manner during hazardous conditions led directly to a collision. Rather than taking responsibility, Mr. Randolph chose to involve outside authorities in an internal HOA matter, which is itself a violation of our dispute resolution bylaws. She paused dramatically, as if waiting for gasps of horror from the audience. Instead, there was confused silence. One hand went up. Jerry Parker, who lived 2 streets over, stood up. "I am sorry, but I do not understand. If there was a car accident, are not you supposed to call the police?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "That would be the case for a normal accident. However, this incident occurred within HOA jurisdiction and should have been handled through proper channels. But